just a minute after 8:30, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this wonderful Tuesday morning, our Good Morning BSN. My name is Okere, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here. Thank you so much for joining from wherever you are joining in the world. Good Morning BSN is our program, and this program is organized by the BSN Impact Center for Great Leadership. The center is an initiative of Business School Netherlands, and it is generously founded by the Culture Factor Group, which I also work with. And our Impact Center is sponsored by the new energy company, Chint Global. The Impact Center for Great Leadership, which I also have the honor of being the director, is a platform where BSN alums and other managers and leaders from companies and society, where we meet to share insights and create new practical knowledge. You can also contact us for more information about what we do, especially about in-company programs to help you grow your talent and to help you grow your leadership and to help you ensure more effectiveness amongst your teams in your organizations. Now, in BSN, we recognize that great leadership rests on 4 pillars: responsible leadership, decision-making leadership, change leadership, and performance leadership. Our weekly Zoominar will focus on one of these great leadership pillars each week. In each episode, we will bring leaders like you to share their experiences, and we all learn something that we can apply in our organizations, in our business, or in our work life. Now, our session starts at 9:15 Amsterdam time. It used to be 9:30, so 9:30 Amsterdam time. It used to be 8:15 Amsterdam time, which is Central European time, and it will end precisely at about 10 o'clock. So this will give you enough time to have a break before your working day starts, so that we can get onto a great day and have something to learn and something to apply. Today, we shall be discussing a very interesting topic. Is your organization change ready? Is your organization change ready? This topic explores part of change leadership, which is one of the 4 pillars of great leadership that we at BSN believe are crucial to making a difference in your organization and in our world. Talking about if your organization is change ready, we have Carol Ariyibi and Tonye Prekhafi with us today to explore this topic. Carol, who is our presenter today, is a business transformation expert, and she's also the board member of the Agile Practitioners Association of Nigeria, and she'll be drawing on her wealth of experience to tell us how you can tell if your organization is indeed change ready. And our reflector for today, Tonye Prekhafi, is the Chief Innovation Officer of Red Star Express PLC, and he also will be sharing his insights and his thoughts on this topic. Carol and Tonye, welcome again today. My pleasure to welcome both of you to Good Morning BSN. Carol, I'm handing over to you now to get us going. Over to you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Nice to be here. I want to thank Dr. OK, for this opportunity, and also to the Impact Center for Great Leadership and the entire team for having me here. So I'm going to dive right in. Let me start by sharing my screen, and please let me know when you can see it. I'm just going to change it to slide share mode now. All right. Please, is it visible? Could you confirm?
Yes. Yes, confirm.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And this is a very interesting topic. Is your organization change ready? And I just want to start with some few definitions, just to be sure that we all share a common context around what change is and what also change readiness is as well. And for me, when I want to define change, I look at change as a deliberate and systemic process, or a natural occurrence, or a disruptive or forceful situation that actually moves a person or an organization from a current condition to a future state. So something, it could be systematic, or it could be a sudden change event that causes you to have the need for change, and hence that call for change readiness. And why is this so important? Because, sometimes change does not give us any announcement that it's coming. It just happens. At other times, it is progressive. So an example of a predictable change could be a pregnancy. So if a wife finds out she's pregnant, you essentially have 9 months to prepare for that change that is going to come up in the next 9 months. But a change like the COVID-19, for example, that was a change that was very disruptive, gave no announcement, and we all had to quickly adapt. So what that means as well is that when change happens, you have 2 choices. You can either transition over time, or adapt immediately. And the nature of the changes we've experienced, in organizations and globally over the last few years have mostly been disruptive changes. You'll find very few changes that give you the prepare. The only benefit we have is the fact that sometimes there's data, historical data that we can rely on that allows us to compare the change we're experiencing now to past changes. So for example, during COVID, everyone kept referring back to the Spanish flu and what happened, and they used that as a basis of reference to try and figure out how to handle, the changes that came with COVID-19. Well, that was because we had the benefit of historical data. But sometimes you don't have that opportunity. So what do? How do you adjust yourself, and how do you lead your organization through the changes that you're facing? Another thing I also want to, focus on is the fact that the type and impact and complexity of changes we experience in organizations today are varied. So initially we had this concept called VUCA, right? You have volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. But now there's a new concept that has come up called DVUCA, which means disruption. At the beginning of VUCA, you have the disruptive factor which comes up, then at the tail end you have diversity. So you have all those complexities impacting us. And the question that comes to mind is, how do we deal with all these changes ourselves, and how do we lead our organizations through these changes? So that was just by way of setting context. And, I want to start by saying, by asking this question: what are the things we need to consider when we're assessing our organization's change readiness? So we've talked about the background. We understand that these changes do happen, and what exactly is change readiness itself, and why is it required? I think change readiness as a concept is that ability or posture of an organization to be continuously ready or anticipating of disruption or change. So it's where that organization has a posture that allows it to be ready for changes to happen, to anticipate those changes, and also creating a system that allows it to respond when those changes come up. So it's sort of like baking that concept of change readiness into the DNA of the organization, such that you're ready and you know what to do when changes happen. Yeah, definitely change catches us by surprise sometimes, but our posture as an organization is very critical and important. That enables us to be able to get to this point of change readiness. So what are the things we need to look at when we're saying an organization needs to be change ready? One of the first factors is our change awareness, right? So how prepared are you? What posture does the organization take in terms of understanding what is happening in your environment? How aware is the organization of the factors that are affecting your organization on a day-to-day basis? It could be government regulations, it could be global economic factors. In my country, for example, coming into this year, a lot about our economic outlook because of the changes that have been brought in by the new administration. So everyone is constantly looking at the economic factors to see and navigate how the organizations are going to react. But if you have a posture that already foresees and is already looking at some of these factors, it helps you to plan ahead. So what is the level of change awareness? Are there people within the organization that are constantly scanning the market to understand the dynamics that keep evolving and coming back, to say, oh, these are things that are coming ahead of us. How do we prepare? So like looking at the outlook, technology or innovative trends, that are most likely to crystallize this year. One of the key ones that I know are going to affect my sector is digital currencies. So our country is looking to, legalize e-currencies very soon. They legalize an e-naira, and they want to take it a step further and allow, crypto exchanges within the local market. I know that is going to have a huge effect, but guess what? If we're in a position where we're ready, so that when our clients are asking about this, we're able to provide those services before they even ask. That means that we are change aware of what is going on. So your level of change awareness is critical. The second is, how quickly does the organization respond to change? This is what I call change agility, right? So your ability to be able to be nimble and, easily respond and quickly put mechanisms in place that allow you as an organization to respond is very important. So just using that example of the crypto naira and all of that. So do we have systems, processes? Do we have, products that, make use of digital currency within our organization today, right? That would allow us to proactively respond to that change. So as the country is launching that solution, we are immediately responding with a product. But guess what? If we're just starting to think about that now, then that means our level of change agility is rather low. So how is, what's the level of change agility within your organization? What's the ability to react and respond? How are you able to quickly shift resources to cater to the needs of disruption when it happens, or even before it happens? Because that's the real state. That's the state we want to get to. The next point is the leadership. Is your leadership team equipped? Are they ready for change? Are they adaptable to change? What do they do when change happens? How do they respond? And I think a lot of us can take lessons from, of course, I keep referring to the COVID situation, because that was one of the ones that comes to mind easily and affected everyone. But how did the leadership team react? Were you able to immediately set up a war room to sit down and look at the processes and how customers would be managed, and how the employees also would be managed throughout the whole crisis? So you can look back and take lessons from that. As I mentioned earlier, certain changes happen and you're able to gather data from that and use it to guide your response the next time you experience that change. So is your leadership team equipped? Are they able to easily navigate the change themselves? And are they able to easily support employees and the different cadres of employees within the organization when change happens? And finally, what is the level of your resilience as an organization? Does change effectively just upend everything, all your systems, your processes, your operations? Are there mechanisms within your organization that allows you to easily transit from a change state to a normal state? Because if we follow some of the methodologies of change, right, particularly Lewin's three-step theory, he talks about unfreeze, change, and freeze. So how easy is it for your organization to move within those three states very quickly? That means if you're able to do that very quickly, that means you're at a heightened level of change readiness. So our ability to, objectively answer these questions as an organization, as a leadership of organizations, is critical to assess whether we are actually at a level of change readiness. So one of the things that I was brought in to do, I joined ARM about 18 months ago. And one of the main focus of that conversation was to bring us to a level where we were change ready. And I'll be talking about some of the things that we did to bring us to that level as I go along. But the first thing was, just to even evaluate, where our current posture as an organization, I start to put in the building blocks, and define what our change management processes should be. What is our overarching vision for change? One of the key things we're doing at that point was, going through our digital transformation journey. And, the idea was, yes, the organization is transforming, but how is that affecting the people, the processes, the operations? What are the things we need to do? And also look at the culture as well. What are the things we need to do from a culture perspective, from a people perspective, to enable change to happen easily? So we're at that level where disruptions come and we're not just reacting, but we are able to proactively engage. So what do you do if your organization is ready? So you've listened to all that, you've gone through all the points, and you said, look, Carol, we tick all the boxes, right? We are ready. We're set to go into change. What are the next steps you need to take? And I'll just run through them at this point. So the first thing is, decide what is that strategic initiative that you're aligning with as an organization, that you're going to use as your case for change, or as maybe your first, practical demo of change transitions. So within ERM for us, it was our digital transformation journey, right? So we looked at the objective and the outcome of that whole strategy, and we said, okay, what are the things we're looking to achieve, and how are we going to get there? So the first thing you need to do is decide what is that strategic initiative, what is the outcome that is the focus that you can galvanize the entire organization around to achieve this change or this goal. I remember listening to a story from Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. She was speaking about, one of the first things she did when she assumed office before she went to the WTO. And, she said, she had just joined the ministry, and, when she came, the first time she visited the facility, the ambience of the whole place, the lifts were down, there was barely any power in the building, and she just said the work environment was not one that would even encourage anything innovative, talk less of digital. So she started to, make some minor changes, put a flower pot here, make sure the lifts are always working, make sure that the floors are powered, and just generally change the ambience. And she said that, for her, those little changes made a lot of difference. Employees started to respond differently because they realized, oh, this is a place that is working. This organization is serious. This is, of course, the example I'm giving is public sector. You probably won't see that in private sector, but in Nigeria, you could see that in public sector. So those quick wins and those minor changes she made a lot of difference to the psyche, and people understood, yes, a change is happening here. This is a new regime. We have to sit up because more is expected to us, or expected from us, because everything around us is changing. So just start identifying that strategic outcome and what it would mean to each and every single individual that is going to be impacted by that change is important. The next step is to initiate. So, and there are change readiness assessments that need to be done for you to really accurately gauge how ready you are for change. In my organization, we adopt ProSci, but I know there are so many other different methodologies and frameworks out there that are available, but we adopted ProSci because it allows us to evaluate the organization and also the individuals. So the various stakeholder groups that are going to be impacted by this change, we were able to assess them and look at the level of readiness. There's also this thing called change saturation, where there are so many changes keep happening within the organization, and people just zoom out or zone out and say, look, I'm done. Mentally, they've disconnected from the organization because they just can't keep up with change. So how do you deal with that? Or how do you deal with a failed change, a change that has happened in the history of the organization, which was so epic, and people always refer to that change and say, look, we can't adapt because we failed here. So an assessment allows you to, unearth all those factors and also now start to look at the gaps. So the next step will be to address those gaps. What are the gaps that will be a hindrance to your successful outcomes? We need to identify those that are, major gaps, and identify quick wins as well, and start to bring in some of those things to start to, create an awareness in the psyche of the people that things have started to change. The next step is to craft a change management strategy and plan. So how exactly do you incorporate change into your activities? So one of the things we started to do to build change readiness was, as part of our project or program initiatives, we always scheduled a change management workshop. So we had a workshop for all the stakeholders, and we said, look, this initiative or this project is going to introduce this amount of change to the organization. This is what it means for you. This is how it's going to benefit you, and we would like you to be on board. We also had individual sessions with change sponsors, the leadership of the leadership driving the change, and just creating an understanding for them and coaching them around what they needed to do to enable change to be successful. and we made sure they organized certain town halls. We made sure they were the ones leading the conversations and communicating the need for change and the benefits of change, and also communicating the progress of that initiative across the organization. And also we stood up also change champions. So within different stakeholder groups, we identified people who were, change advocates and would keep them informed about what was going on. And anytime we needed to do an activity, whether it was testing or a pilot launch, those change advocates would be the boots on ground, making sure that everybody was onboarded and everybody was okay. And they were also the funnels for feedback for us to keep us of what was across the organization. So you need to create that change management strategy and plan that helps you to do that. Okay, I hope I'm doing well on time. I'm trying to
we're actually out of time, but if you could just wrap up in maybe 2 minutes for the next slide.
Great.
Thanks.
Great. Okay, thank you. So the next point is just create that coalition team, that strong team that is the engine room behind the change, and make sure that they're there understanding the strategy and helping you execute it, and you commence your activities and you go ahead. So last point is this: what do you do if your organization is not ready for change? We talked about the change assessment, right? So we talked about the change readiness. So the first thing is to build that change readiness culture across all the levels. We've understood now that there has to be organizational resilience baked into it. There has to be change agility baked into it. So how do you bring in all those concepts and empower and involve people as well, so that they understand that vision that you're trying to achieve as an organization? And I said, envision the future together. You need to be sure that everybody across different levels of the organization understand where the organization is going and why these changes that are happening are important for us to adapt or to adopt, so that they are able to line up with the change. The important thing in change is understanding what is in it for them. As long as people can understand what they stand to gain, and what the trade-off is and what will happen if they don't adopt that change, it's easy for them to align together. And finally, develop that change responsiveness mechanism. So within your processes, your procedures, your systems within the organization, even the structure of the organization, how does it enable change, or how does it prevent change from being effective within the organization? So you have to, if your organization is not yet at the readiness, then you need to really critically look at your change responsiveness mechanisms and make sure that you have things in place that make it easy for you to adapt, and also make it easy for you to transit from a change state to a stable state, because that's important, making sure that people are more willing to change the next time you call upon them. So I think I'll stop here at this point and take questions. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Carol. Much appreciated. We will soon get questions, but before we get into the questions, I'm going to ask Tonya Pregafi, our reflector, to share a few points from today, and thereafter we can take questions. Just to announce as well, if you have a question, you can also type it in the chat box so that we can read it very quickly. And Tonya, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, okay. Thank you, Carol, for those insights. I'm sure that the entire participants have learned a thing or two from your presentation. And I like the fact that you started by outlining what change really is, because a lot of times people think that all changes are disruptive, but sometimes change may not be disruptive. Even though they are creative destruction, the concept of creative destruction that leads to some predictable kind of changes in the environment. There are also changes that we don't envisage, just like you gave an example of the Carol COVID-19 experience that we've had, that changed a lot of how we approach businesses, that changed a lot of how we see strategy today. And and has affected a lot of businesses going forward. Carol was able to share insights around the VUCA world that we found ourselves, and also let us know that it's no longer VUCA, and we now have disruption and at the beginning and diversity at the end. These are key challenges that are affecting businesses today, and I see a need for us as leaders and as change leaders to adapt. In looking at whether organizations are change ready, she identified the various levels of that we should look at. We should look at the areas of change awareness. We should look at how agile we are as businesses. You know, one of the key concepts that came up after COVID-19, or that became very prominent after COVID-19, was resilience and agility. And I like the fact that you know, Carol was able to share that in assessing how organizations are change ready. She talked about how agile we are and how resilient we are to change. In addressing what to do if organizations are change ready, the strategic initiatives are also very critical, which she started with. How do you identify strategy different from when the business was calm or the environment was calm? I would also like to state here that relying on the same leadership and management approaches used when the organization isn't going through any form of shift won't necessarily work during organizational change. So the same, I recall, for those of us who are movie buffs, if you've seen the movie The Godfather, when Michael had to change the advisor, who is called the consigliere, and he asked why. He told him that he was not a wartime consigliere. And so the lesson you take from that is that there's a peacetime leadership and there's a wartime leadership. Being able to adapt to those different changes will make you a great change leader. But what we have found out is that there are people who thrive during peace and expect to use the same strategy during challenging or disruptive periods, and it doesn't work. So it is important note of deciding the strategic initiatives that will drive the process once we identify that we're change ready. She also talked about change management strategy and plan, building a team, building a formidable team to drive change through the system, and also looked at what to do if your organization isn't change ready, to build collective change readiness across the culture, envision the future together with the team, because change leadership is about driving the people to achieve the set goals and objectives that is leading to the change. And finally, I would just like to say that without doing things differently, our company is unlikely to succeed or to last. And in the world of business sustainability, companies are projected to endure many changes over the next, few years.
Thank you. Tonya, can you hear us? We've lost your video, and now we've lost your audio as well. Can you hear us? Oh, I think we've lost him. Internet challenges. But thank you so much, Carol. Thank you, Tonya, for the reflection as well. Now we go over to questions. If you have a question, please let us have it. We just have a few minutes for questions. We will be taking 2 questions, but if there are more than 2 questions, we will send them across to Carol, and of course, the answers we will circulate to you. So please, if you have a question, you can type them in the chat box and I will read out your question. Otherwise, you can raise your hand and we will ask you to quickly ask your question. Questions, anyone? Questions? Questions, anyone? And while people are coming together, Carol, I have a question for you. Who determines whether it should be VUCA, DVUCA, or something? Who changes it? Because they keep changing it all the time. Who makes that decision? Do you have like a council of change practitioners, global council that decides on it or something?
Well, interestingly enough, this concept of DVUCA, I'd heard of VUCA D before, right? I wasn't quite sure of the source, but I had to check this one, This was put forward by Professor Ian Woodward from INSEAD. So I think you have a lot of change theorists and management theorists and professors who do their research on what's going on and just, calculate all of that together and come up with some of these concepts. But when you look at it at the face of it, in reality, it needs to be updated because these are the times we live in. VUCA was, the basic, but now we're dealing with that diversity. You're talking about diversity, inclusion, equity across different parts of the organization. Disruption is a consistent factor now, which we can't escape, more so because of technology that keeps evolving at a breakneck speed, right? So I think it's just what is happening around us.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Carol.
Any other apologies, sorry, I think I suffered a network glitch. Apologies for that.
Yes. We've started taking questions already, but we indeed got your contribution and thank you so much for it. Any other questions? Someone had sent me a question, but I don't know, but that was before this, about leadership. What if your leadership is the problem with the change? What do you do?
Very interesting question. And the truth is that a lot of times leadership is is the problem. But I think what we can do is, that aspect of coaching. So change management talks a lot about coaching leaders, because a lot of times we assume that leaders understand the need for change, and that's a very dangerous assumption. We need to make them aware of the changes that are happening, and also aware of the fact that that change is affecting them personally, and as well as affecting their posture as a leader. So a leader has to look at change from two perspectives. You always have to look at how it's impacting you, and you have to make sense of the change. Then how is it impacting your team and those right below you, and how is it impacting the organization, and take decisions across those three levels. So we found out that coaching leaders into, first of all, understanding their awareness for change. ProSci also talks about this thing called the ABCs of leadership, that the leader has to be aware, they have to be the communicator and the face of the change as well. So we need to also, stress the fact that they need to be the face of change, not just the voice behind the scenes setting strategy, but the driving force that makes sure that people see that, oh, the entire leadership is aligned on this. So that sort of causes them to move. The truth is that not every leader is going to be onboarded on the change, at the same time. So, but what you need to do is establish that critical mass and look for, the majority and the most influential. So that the same methodology that used to map your sponsors' level of impact and their authority within the organization and their level of influence is very key. So there are some leaders that in the seniority rank are not so senior, but they're very influential. So you look at those that are influential, those that have a lot of clout across the organization, coach them, identify those who are early advocates, who are willing to even listen, and that's how you build your coalition. And as they continue to be the face, they bring other leaders on board, and that's how you get out. The aim is not to get everybody, because the truth is that sometimes you can't get all leaders on board, but the critical mass and coaching them as much as possible.
Thank you, Carol. I see one more question, but we have actually run out of time. I see another question coming in at the end of the session. But we actually have run out of time. So please, what we will do for these two questions, the first one is, how do you identify and address resistance to change within a team? And the second one is, for a quarter of the century, popular time to describe modern strategic environment. VUCA also, this is...
sorry, it's not a question, Karen. It's just information.
It's a comment. I see, yeah. Thank you very much, Eileen. Carol, what we will do, if you don't mind, and this is for Donald. Donald, we will reply your question. I will get Carol to send a response, and we will put that up. Either we'll send it to you or put it up when we are publishing this, because this will be published as an article as well. So you please stay tuned, because we have actually run out of time. I want to say a very big thank you again to Tony Epigraphy for his reflection, and of course to Carol for the amazing presentation and answering the questions that we have. Thank you so much, everybody else, for joining in. Next week, we also have a Good Morning BSN, so do stay tuned, and you will have another opportunity to learn. At the same time, we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much.